Let's rock this joint!
The world of pop culture has been one hell of a ride. We're talking horse-drawn carriages to flying cars, black and white flickering films to 3D VR craziness. It's wild. Trust me. Today, we'll be going on this adventure, diving deep into all the iconic films, chart-topping tunes, and mega-famous celebs that shaped each decade. We'll be hitting up the glamorous golden age, the rocking rebellious 50s and 60s, the far-out disco days, and blasting into the digital era. Oh, and hold on to your hats, because we're even going to take a sneak peek at what's been going down in modern times, the 2010s right up till now. It's going to be a trip, I promise you that. Let's kick things off with the 1900s to 1920s, the birth of pop culture as we know it. I mean, can you even imagine a world without movies and jazz? What did people even do for fun back then? Knit socks and bake cookies? No thanks.
No thanks.
Please?
No thanks.
A little one.
Yeah, no thanks.
So, films were just starting to become a thing. And let me tell you, they were wild. I'm talking silent movies with no sound. Just music and title cards. And the biggest star of them all? Charlie Chaplin, baby! This dude was like the OG of comedy, with his little mustache and bowler hat. He was making people laugh their asses off before talkies were even a thing. And then there was jazz. And let me tell you, jazz was the thing. It was like the rebellious teenager of music genres, all improvisation and syncopation. And who was leading the charge? None other than Louis Armstrong, the trumpet master himself. He was blowing minds and breaking barriers, making music that would influence generations to come.
What a wonderful world.
But it wasn't just Charlie and Louis. This era had tons of other game changers. Like, have you seen The Birth of a Nation? It might have been controversial, but it was also groundbreaking in terms of filmmaking techniques. And then there were the Roaring Twenties. With flappers and speakeasies and all that jazz, pun intended.
No! God, please, no! No!
Of course, it wasn't all glamour and good times. The 1910s had World War I, which was really awful. But even in the darkest times, pop culture found a way to shine through. People needed an escape, and movies and music gave them that. And let's not forget about the other genres that were starting to emerge. Blues, ragtime, swing. They were all laying the foundation for the pop culture explosion that was to come. It's crazy to think about how much influence this era had on everything that came after. But what was it like to be a teenager in the 1920s? Did they have the equivalent of TikTok dances and Instagram challenges? I bet they were doing the Charleston and posting about it on whatever the hell the 1920s version of social media was. Anyway, this era was just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. And speaking of icebergs, let's talk about Titanic. No, not the movie with Leo and Kate.
You jump high, jump right. Right.
But the actual disaster. Can you imagine the media frenzy that would have occurred if that happened today? It would have broken the internet. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, the early 1900s set the stage for everything that was to come in pop culture. It was like the big bang of entertainment, and we're still feeling the aftershocks today. Now let's go to the golden age of Hollywood, and oh my god, it's like stepping into a time machine. I mean, can you imagine a world without color movies? I bet people dreamt in black and white too. But you know what was in color? Judy Garland's Ruby Slippers in The Wizard of Oz.
You forgetting the ruby slippers? Slippers. Yes.
That movie was a trip. Flying monkeys, a talking scarecrow, and a little dog too. They weren't messing around when they made that movie. And don't even get me started on Audrey Hepburn. That woman was a goddamn icon. Breakfast at Tiffany's? More like breakfast at Tiffany's, lunch at Tiffany's, and dinner at Tiffany's, because I could watch that movie all day, every day. But it wasn't just about the movies. The music scene was super lit too. Big band and swing were like the TikTok dances of their day. Everyone was doing it. And if you couldn't swing, you couldn't be part of the frat. And let's talk about fashion. Have you seen the suits and dresses from back then? It's like everyone was ready for a fancy-ass party at any moment. I bet even when they went to the bathroom, they did it in style. But it wasn't all glitz and glamour. The 1930s and 40s had some pretty heavy stuff going down. The Great Depression, World War II, it was like the world was on fire. But somehow, pop culture still managed to thrive. I think it's because people needed an escape. When the world is falling apart around you, sometimes you just need to watch a movie or listen to some music and forget about it all for a little while. But you know what I want to know? What were the scandals like back then? We have celebrity scandals and controversies out the wazoo these days. But what was it like in the golden age? Did Clark Gable get caught with a prostitute? Did Bette Davis have a secret love child? I need answers, people.
I need answers.
Alright, so we're diving into the 50s and 60s now, and let me tell you, it's not what you expect. I mean, first off, you had the birth of rock and roll. Like, can you even imagine a world without Elvis's gyrating hips and Chuck Berry's guitar licks? What did people even listen to before that? Frank Sinatra.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars.
And then you had movies like Psycho coming out and scaring the living daylights out of everyone. I'm pretty sure that movie single-handedly ruined showers for an entire generation. But you know what? It was genius. Hitchcock was like, you know what this movie needs? A murder scene in a bathroom. And everyone just tagged along. But it wasn't just about the movies and music. The 50s and 60s were like the birth of youth culture. Teenagers were finally like, screw this. We're not just gonna sit around and listen to our parents' boring-ass music and watch their lame-ass movies. We're gonna make our own stuff. And that's exactly what they did. They started wearing leather jackets and greasing their hair back and just generally being rebels without a cause. It was like a big ol' screw you to the establishment. And I am here for it. Of course, you can't talk about the 60s without talking about the Beatles. Those four lads from Liverpool changed the entire game. They thought rock and roll needed some British accents and a ton of screaming girls. And the world was like, you're absolutely right, let's do this. But you know what I think was the real game changer in the 60s? The fashion. I mean, have you seen the pictures, the miniskirts, the go-go boots, even the tie-dye? It was like a goddamn explosion of color and style. And don't even get me started on the hairstyles. I mean, how did they even get their hair that big? It's like they were hiding small animals there. And you know, I gotta give a shout out to all the iconic ladies of the 60s. You had Twiggy with her big ol' eyes and tiny little body, just straight up changing the modeling game. And then you had Audrey Hepburn, who was like the epitome of class and elegance, even when she was drinking coffee and eating pastries in front of Tiffany's.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
But let's be real, the 60s weren't all peace and love and rainbows. You had the Vietnam War going on, and all the protests and counterculture that came with it. It was a tumultuous time, man. But you know what? Sometimes the best art comes out of the darkest times. And the 60s definitely proved that. So yeah, the 50s and 60s were a wild ride. And speaking of wild rides, you know what came next? The 70s and 80s, baby. I'm talking disco balls, punk rock, and some of the most iconic movies of all time. First of all, disco was literally everywhere. Everyone was wearing bell-bottoms and dancing to the Bee Gees like their lives depended on it. And don't even get me started on the hairstyles. Have you ever seen photos of people from the 70s? It's like they all stuck their fingers in electrical sockets before leaving the house. But then, out of nowhere, punk rock comes in and just smacks disco right in the face. Suddenly, it wasn't cool to be all glittery and glamorous anymore. Now it was all about wearing ripped jeans, leather jackets, and safety pins as accessories. It was like, screw the system, man. Let's get angry and break stuff. And then, in the midst of all this chaos, you've got these iconic musicians just straight up dominating the scene. Like, Michael Jackson drops Thriller, and everyone loses their minds. Madonna comes out with Like a Virgin, and suddenly every girl wants to wear lace gloves and a boy toy belt buckle. It was a whole new level of pop stardom. But the real game changer of the 80s? MTV, baby. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to just make good music. You had to have a killer music video too. I mean, Take On Me by a-ha? That music video blew everyone's minds. It was like, no shot, you can combine animation with real footage? What is this sorcery? And boy, the movies of the 80s were ridiculous. You've got E.T. making everyone cry their eyes out, The Breakfast Club making everyone want to be a rebellious teen, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off making everyone want to skip school and hijack a parade float. And then, of course, there's the iconic Star Wars.
Band of Heroes.
The thing that changed the game for sci-fi movies forever. Unfortunately, it wasn't all fun and games in the 80s. You had the AIDS crisis, the Cold War, and all sorts of political and social upheaval. But somehow, pop culture kept chugging along. And the fashion, oh my god. Neon everything, shoulder pads for days, and more spandex than a superhero convention. It was like everyone woke up one day and decided, you know what, I want to look like I'm in a Jane Fonda workout video. But honestly, I think that's what makes the 70s and 80s so cool. It was this weird, wild mix of rebellion, excess, and creativity, and it paved the way for so much of the pop culture we have today. Like, can you even imagine a world without Star Wars references? Without Madonna's influence on fashion and music? Without the idea that a music video can be a work of art in itself? The 70s and 80s laid the groundwork, man. And speaking of groundwork, it's time for the 90s and 2000. You've got the rise of the boy bands. I'm talking about your Backstreet Boys, your Asterisk NSYNC, your 98 Degrees. It was like, everywhere you turned, there was a group of guys in matching outfits singing about love and heartbreak, and the girls were digging deep into it. It was like Beatlemania all over again, but with frosted tips and cargo pants. But then, out of nowhere, hip-hop and R&B just came in and took over. You've got Tupac and Biggie just spitting straight fire on the mic, and then you've got Destiny's Child, TLC, and Aaliyah bringing that smooth, soulful sound. 1 minute you're bopping along to I Want It That Way, and the next you're nodding your head to No Scrubs. Oh, and the TV shows were on another level. You've got Friends, which was basically just a bunch of attractive people sitting around in a coffee shop, but for some reason, everyone was obsessed with it. And then you've got The Simpsons.
You'll never see again. Oh, thank God you woke up!
Which has been on for so long, I'm pretty sure it's outlasted most real-life families. But the real game changer of the 90s and 2000s?
Could you lend us $5, please?
Reality TV, baby. With reality TVs, you didn't need to be a trained actor or have any real talent to be famous. All you needed was a camera crew and a willingness to make a complete ass of yourself on national television. The Real World started it all, but then you had Survivor, Big Brother, and The Bachelor. So why watch scripted shows when you could watch real people backstab each other and make out in hot tubs? And let's not forget about the movies, especially Titanic, which was basically just a big old metaphor for Leonardo DiCaprio's career. He was on top of the world, king of the iceberg, and then bam! He's shivering in the North Atlantic watching his Oscar dreams sink to the bottom of the ocean. But the best part of the 90s and 2000s has to be the fashion. I mean, have you seen photos from back then? It's like everyone raided a thrift store and then got dressed in the dark. You had dudes wearing baggy jeans that were so low you could see their entire ass crack. And then you had girls wearing tiny little crop tops and platform shoes that were like a foot tall. How did anyone walk in those things without breaking an ankle? But as crazy as the 90s and 2000s were, they were also a time of major technological changes. You had the rise of the internet, which meant that suddenly you could connect with people all over the world. And then you had cell phones becoming more and more popular, which meant that you could take your drama with you wherever you went. And that literally became the norm from the 2010s. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to just live your life. You had to document every second of it on Instagram and Snapchat. And don't even get me started on the influencers. These people were famous for what exactly? Taking selfies and selling teeth whitening kits? I don't know, man.
What the is this? I don't know.
But you know what really blew my mind? streaming services, like, remember when you had to actually go to a store and buy a CD or rent a movie? Yeah, that ancient history. Now you can just sit on your couch and watch whatever you want, whenever you want. Netflix and chill, am I right? And the music, oh my god. You've got K-pop groups like BTS just taking over the whole world. I don't even speak Korean, but I find myself humming along to Dynamite like it's my job. And then there are artists like Billie Eilish, who's basically a modern world prodigy. She's out here writing songs about depression and stuff, and I'm like, girl, I feel you. But let's talk about the real MVP of the 2010s and 2020s, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How many bloody movies have they made at this point? Like 100? And people are still not tired of them. I guess there's just something about watching buff dudes in spandex punching each other that never gets old. And you know, it's not just about American pop culture anymore. The whole world is getting in on the action. You've got Bollywood movies breaking box office records and Latin music taking over the charts. It's like, we're all just one big global village now. But with all this connectedness comes some downsides too. Like, cancel culture is a real thing now. One wrong tweet and your whole career could be over. But despite all the craziness, there's still some good happening in pop culture. Like, we're finally starting to see more diversity and representation in movies and TV shows, and people are using their platforms to speak out about important issues like Black Lives Matter and climate change. So yeah, the 2010s and 2020s have been a wild ride. But you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything, because at the end of the day, pop culture is what brings us all together. It gives us something to talk about, something to bond over, and in a world that's so divided right now, I think that's more important than ever. Looking back, it's hard to pick just one decade that had the biggest impact on modern pop culture. I mean, the 50s and 60s gave us rock and roll and Beatlemania. The 70s and 80s had disco, punk rock, and the rise of the music video. The 90s and 2000s brought us boy bands, hip-hop, and reality TV. And the 2010s and 2020s, they brought us social media, streaming, and a whole new level of global connectedness. But you know what? I think the real winner here is us, the fans, the consumers, the people who live and breathe this every day. Pop culture has been there for us through the good times and the bad, giving us something to bond over and something to escape into. So whether you're a die-hard fan of the golden age of Hollywood or a Gen Z kid who lives for the latest viral meme, there's no denying the power of pop culture. It's shaped our lives, our relationships, and our identities. And who knows what the future holds? Maybe we'll all be watching movies in virtual reality, or listening to music that's beamed directly into our brains. But one thing's for sure, pop culture will always be there, evolving and adapting and blowing our minds in new and exciting ways. But as for my favorite era, man, that's like asking me to pick a favorite child. But if I had to choose, I'd say the 80s. I mean, come on. Take on Me and The Breakfast Club? That's some GOAT level stuff right there.